Welcome to Par Review, where small moments become big stories. Lean in, the next few minutes might change how you see today. The sky above River Heights High looked like somebody had erased the blue with a grey pencil. On the roof, wind lifted the edges of a faded uniform, and a crowd formed below with the fast, careless curiosity that belongs mostly to teenagers and camera phones. Emily Lynn stood near the parapet, pale but not theatrical, as if she had been asked to hold a posture she didn't choose. Jack Carter arrived with security faster than anyone expected of the quiet boy who supposedly felt nothing. He didn't shout, he didn't lunge. He walked close enough to be heard without an audience, and said her name like a handle he could hand back to her. Emily. She didn't move. The roof door clanged behind him, and the murmur rose from the courtyard like a weather report. The rumour was clean and cruel. The class fund had gone missing. Somebody whispered, "Emily," and the whisper turned into a verdict because poor kids are easier to imagine as thieves. Jack offered no speeches about life's value. He asked her to take his hand because a hand was a practical thing, and this was a problem of physics before it was a poem. When she hesitated, he added the next small, sturdy sentence. "We can show them." It wasn't magic, it was confidence that evidence existed somewhere beyond the screen grabs and the chat feed crawling across the phones held up like little billboards. She let her fingers settle into his. The wind made a tug at both of them. He pivoted, anchored, and pulled her gently in with a movement a coach would teach for basic rescue. Then stepped sideways so the nearest camera saw only the back of his blazer. 100 tiny reactions streaked through the comment feed anyway. Applause emojis, conspiracies about why he moved like that, a textbook paragraph on the psychology of attention. He ignored all of it. Down the stairs, Emily's breath snagged as if her lungs needed a new rule. In the hall, the principal tried to ask questions that sounded legal, but the questions were flavored by the same bias that had lifted Emily's name off the rumor pile. She was a girl who walked home after late shifts, who carried recyclables in drawstring bags, who wore last year's blazer with careful pride. Jack asked for a private office, a clock, and 10 minutes. He texted his father's assistant to retrieve a copy of the hallway camera aimed at the seniors' lockers, a camera installed during a rash of petty thefts and promptly forgotten when the news cycle changed. While they waited, he let Emily sit, drink water, and keep her shoulders against the chair back so she wouldn't fold into herself. He didn't say, "It's okay." He asked for the exact time her homeroom ended, which door she used, and which students had keys to the activities cabinet. Questions are small scaffolds for a person who has had the floor pulled from under her. When the clip arrived, it was nonsense for 8 minutes. Empty hall, the gold triangle of afternoon light sliding across waxed tile, then suddenly clear. A student with a neat ponytail and quick hands stepped into frame, checked the hall twice, opened Emily's backpack, and took the envelope. Dinah Drew. The kind of name adults forget until it's written at the top of a disciplinary form. Jack did not smile. He asked the principal to watch the full clip, to call Dinah's parents, and to call the school resource officer so the statement would be taken with precision. Emily watched the footage with both hands around the paper cup, like it might cool what burned her palms. When the principal glanced at Jack for commentary, he had none to offer. Commentary was how they had landed here. The only useful thing was the record, the complete one, and the small return to ordinary that follows a correct diagnosis. He kept his tone even, favoured evidence over noise, and let ordinary care outwork drama. He paused. By late afternoon, the campus had moved from scandal to clean-up, which is what most institutions are best at. Dinah cried, then denied, then cried again when she learned there was a second angle showing her handing the envelope to a friend outside the east stairwell. The apology came halting, parent-prompted and narrow. It did not understand what had been at stake 2 hours earlier on the roof. Emily accepted it because acceptance was a door that let the day end, but her eyes looked grainy, and the corners of her mouth had learned the stiffness of someone who kept her courage quiet. In the hallway, Sabrina Tran appeared, Jack's sister, beauty forward and temper forward, and demanded to know why Jack had humiliated the wrong person. She meant Emily. Jack told Sabrina he would not be debating in the corridor. Truth does not need volume, and arguments in corridors do not end. He pointed toward the office, toward the closed folder with the evidence log, and toward the stairs, where Sabrina could take her heat elsewhere. She had known Jack all his life. She understood that tone. It meant the conversation would not happen. In the days that followed, Jack changed nothing grand and 100 small things. He set alarms for breakfast and brought it to the desk where Emily studied in the library. Oatmeal with apple and cinnamon, fuel that stays. He did not call it caring. He called it routine. He asked how she preferred to be asked questions. He learned that she liked information with time to answer, and that she hated pity disguised as pep talk. He stopped telling her to sleep and started sending her the schedule that made sleep possible. When classmates whispered a new version of the story, this time about a romance between the aloof boy and the quiet girl, Jack let the rumor roll downhill until it lost grade 4. At a birthday party for a wealthy classmate, an event that treats teenagers like a rehearsal for adulthood, the old fault lines showed themselves again. A joke grazed Emily like a blade. A glass fell. Camera flashes rose like insect wings. Jack did the least cinematic thing. He asked for an apology, got none, and left with the person who had been cut. In the emergency clinic, the nurse noted the slice was shallow, a thing of gauze and tape. Emily said she was fine and tried to apologize for the cost, as if dignity were a bill she shouldn't submit. Jack paid, filed the receipt, then added a line to a timeline that wasn't about lawsuits, but about not letting the crowd's mood eclipse what had happened. So much of survival is the boring work of naming the event correctly. He walked her home through the cheap part of River Heights where porches slumped and good people did their best anyway. She kept one hand at her wrist where the nurse had taped the gauze. "I don't want you to pity me," she said, not because she thought he did, but because the sentence had lived so long in her throat that it needed air. "I won't," he said. "I would rather do things than feel the right thing." She almost smiled at that, at the idea that a boy who had been labeled emotionally blank would choose verbs over adjectives. In the days that followed, he kept showing up with verbs. 5. He brought breakfast most mornings because breakfast is what keeps a body from shaking at 10 a.m. He asked for help on math not because he needed it, though he did, but because asking was a way of letting her stand in the bright part of her life. She taught him the habit of writing out every step. He taught her to mark 5-minute breaks and to stretch her neck so the ache didn't settle into a permanent angle. The librarian learned to leave them the corner table without fuss. When Jack's friends rolled eyes and called him domesticated, he offered to share the oatmeal and got exactly the refusal he expected. He didn't mind. He was building a small, repeatable life with someone who had never been offered one. On a bad week, a group of boys from the vocational school at the edge of town tried to corner Emily in an alley off 9th, the way boys sometimes do when they want to practice power. Jack didn't throw a punch. He did the math on the crowd and the sight lines, said the words resource officer, witnesses, and parents' names, and watched the temperature drop. He also said his own last name at a volume that suggested consequences. River Heights had a long memory for families who paid the fundraiser bills. The boys stood down in the silly, swaggering way that doesn't cost them anything. When it was quiet again, Emily asked him to give her a minute. 6. He tried to help pick up the scattered plastic bottles from her recycling bag. She asked him not to. "Please," she added, and then, as if the request were too bare on its own, "I need you to see me doing it." He stood there with his hands at his sides while she gathered what had been thrown. He wanted to say a sentence about how wrong it all was, about how the world should be, about how much he hated the numbers that added up to this alley and this hour. He said none of it. "Okay," he said instead, "you're good at fixing things." It didn't sound like praise, and it wasn't meant as rescue. It was an observation, like telling a runner their cadence was clean. Emily blinked, and the hot, sour air of the alley shifted. Later, when she walked him to the bus stop, she didn't thank him for scaring off the boys. She thanked him for not making her a display. That night in his room, Jack wrote 3 lines on a sticky note and put it on the frame of his monitor, where his glance would catch it every day: wall, truth, lock, boundary, light, discipline. He had learned that a person could be held together by small, right words as effectively as by larger, louder ones. He also learned that if you keep a rhythm, you sometimes get to choose the song. Samvamfi, spring tipped toward exams, and River Heights shifted into the weather of ambition. In the counselor's office, Emily named 2 schools in the same breath, Berkeley and UCLA, then said she would accept what the scholarship committee decided. The counselor had the grace not to look surprised. She had read Emily's file. She knew the distance that could be crossed with a bus pass, a hard winter, and a stubborn brain. Jack named a state school down the freeway because his grades had a different shape, and because leaving his father's health insurance felt like a risk, with more edge than reward. The counselor had the same grace for him. Courage comes in many forms, and sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stay near the help they actually have. Sabrina drifted in and out of the story, first as a threat, then as a cautionary tale, and finally as a person trying not to be either. Sabrina said cruel things when she was scared, which was often, and once lifted a hand toward Emily out of an old habit she hadn't examined. Jack caught Sabrina's wrist and let go immediately, enough to mark the boundary without writing a scene. He didn't explain himself. Boundaries are explanation. In a quieter week, Sabrina asked whether Jack really liked a girl who could come undone so fast. Jack answered honestly, "Everyone comes undone. Emily ties herself back together." Sabrina looked away and, for a change, did not argue. Growth often sounds like silence at first. The night before the chemistry exam, Jack and Emily sat at the library until the lights blinked, warning, then moved to the Carter kitchen where Jack boiled noodles the way YouTube had taught him. Too salty, but warm. They didn't make promises, they underlined formulas and wrote out questions for the morning. When Jack walked Emily to the bus stop, she said the thing she hadn't let herself say, that if they ended up at different schools, she planned to carry the distance like a training weight, not like a loss. "You don't have to agree," she said. "I just wanted that sentence to exist somewhere besides my head." Jack said he would carry the same weight and didn't mind if it made them both stronger. He was not a poet, but the sentence still worked. Tumuntin, June arrived with its bright, relentless confidence, and with it the numbers that matter to young lives. Emily scored at the top of the district and near the top of the state. Scholarship committees liked her grades, her essays, and the rumour-free neatness of her file after the spring clean-up. Jack passed his exams and accepted the nearby college that would let him work afternoons at his father's warehouse and make dinner before 7. Sabrina surprised everyone by asking to study overseas where nobody knew her worst days. The Carter house absorbed the decisions the way houses do, quietly, with new lists on the fridge. On a blue morning at the end of the month, Emily brought Jack a bag with 2 things in it, a hardcover notebook and a cheap tin of candy shaped like stars. The notebook was for keeping promises that are really schedules. The candy was for the pockets of days that needed a bright taste. "I'll be back every 2 weeks," she said, and when he made a face at the exactness, she laughed. 2 weeks is my limit for missing you." The laugh punctured something heavy in him. He said, "Okay," and meant it. They did not fall into tragedy when the semester began. They fell into practice, calls at set times, screenshots of sunsets, small proofs of ordinary days done well. Emily learned to run morning miles on a campus that finally felt like it had room for her. Jack learned the math of inventory and the finer math of people who have worked on their feet longer than he has been alive. In a video call on a Thursday, she told him she had stopped trying to figure out who deserved what and had started writing down what she could offer instead. "It's a better list," she said. He agreed because he had made the same shift without naming it. A year slid by. Emily returned in new hair and calmer sleep. Another spring found Jack still working the warehouse clock, the note on his monitor now 4 lines long. By the 3rd summer, they had turned calls into muscle memory. Emily returned often, sometimes bearing a new haircut, sometimes a paper marked with a professor's tidy praise, sometimes only the clear forehead of a girl who has slept enough nights in a row to dream the constructive kinds of dreams. Jack kept his sticky note in the same place and added a 4th line under the others. Pace. Mercy. One afternoon, on a bench outside the warehouse, Emily said, "Marry me before Sabrina does." And Jack laughed because he had said the same sentence to himself the week before and wondered whether it was dumb to say it out loud first. It was not. At the wedding, Sabrina cried in the exaggerated way she did everything and then laughed at herself for it. Dinah drew, sent a gift and a long letter with an apology that knows what it cost. The principal came. The librarian came. A resource officer with a new grey at the temple came and did not mention the alley. Nobody mentioned the roof. The world had given them a violence that never fully belonged to them. The rest of the world gave them an ordinary sweetness to replace it. In the photos, Emily's face is clear, not because the light was perfect, but because she had learned to stand where the sun could find her. Jack looks like a person who knows how to hold a boundary and a promise in the same pair of hands. When people asked later how the story turned, they said the truth. There had been no miracle, just witnesses, schedules, oatmeal, and a door held open on a loud day so somebody good could walk back inside. Your turn, share your take, add a twist, or tell me what to cover next in the comments. If this story hit the mark, tap like and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter with PA Review. Wishing you and your family a day full of joy and happiness with your loved ones. Goodbye, and see you again.